Okay. All right. Good morning. Welcome. It's nice to have you here at another ACA Forum. Today, we have a couple of special guests, Paulina Alvarado Goldman and Monica Bancina, who are going to be presenting their research, artificial intelligence and anti-corruption, mapping institutional frameworks, legal constraints, and governance risk. Uh, there will be half an hour for the presentation and then another about half an hour for questions and answers. Let me just introduce our speakers. Paulina Alvarado Goldman is the founder and CEO of Capacity Building and Policy Experts LLC and an adjunct professor of public policy at Rider University. With over 20 years of global experience, she works at the intersection of governance, public policy, and technology. She regularly advises NGOs, foundations, and public institutions on ethics, accountability, and data strategy. She holds master's degrees from Johns Hopkins in public policy and UC Berkeley in information and data science. Her research explores corruption perceptions, nonprofit accountability, and the ethical use of AI in civic infrastructure. She has also authored numerous publications. Her most recent work includes a chapter in Democracy and Corruption, Resistance and Regime Decline, which was published by Edward Elgar in 2025, where she examines how ICT tools in India and China are used both to resist and reinforce corruption. Paulina regularly presents her work internationally and leads capacity building trainings on ethical systems change for academic and community audiences. And Monica Bancina is a PhD candidate at the Max Weber Institute of Sociology at Heidelberg University. She holds a master's degree in political science, where she specialized in democratic backsliding and political corruption. In her doctoral research on the propensity to report organizational misconduct, she examines the organizational and cultural factors shaping ethical behavior in institutions. Her broader research interests include systemic corruption, speak up cultures, and the use of AI in anti corruption strategies. Welcome, Paulina and Monica.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Should we begin then? Can we? Perfect. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for making yourself time to listen to our presentation on artificial intelligence and anti-corruption. We are going to briefly talk about well, the best practices are going to be briefly introduced. We're going to introduce the methodology, how we worked with, what we worked with, and we have a comparative case study between the United States and Germany with the focus on AI in anti-corruption practices and strategies. Where we are going to soon also explain the various institutional differences, implementations. We have a brief introduction on the paradigm shift that was impacted by DOGE within the United States. And we will have also some introduction to our current research. So here we have, as mentioned, a comparative analysis between the two countries where we looked concretely at corruption strategies and tried to see concretely what the role of the AI in contemporary governance within the both countries were. So this examination focused concretely on AI systems such as machine learning. We also looked at generative AI, optimization algorithms within the public sectors. So concretely, we looked within the German ministries, also within the federal states, within the ministries in the United States. And we tried to see what initiatives there are regarding the detection, prevention of corruption with the help of various AI tools. Our central research question here was then, how is AI deployment both supporting and undermining democracies? This would be also a very interesting question for future research to see where there's potential for democratic backsliding, as there are a lot of opportunities here, risks, not opportunities. Um, and when we looked at the concept of corruption, we analyzed various definitions. We looked at Joseph Nye, foundational definition, at the Aristotelian political theory versus the public versus private interest. Um, we also looked through various corruption in procurement definitions, and we came up with a little puzzle of our own, which is the deliberate misuse of public authority, institutional processes, or technology for private or political gain, measurable through financial harm, systemic exclusion, or bias, and detectable data-driven indicators. Concretely, when it comes to the use of AI, here again, there are, from scholars, I guess there are different understandings of what AI is. Here, we focused on the algorithmic systems in the government that refer to a broad class of automated technologies that include those based on machine learning, such as the Gen AI, predictive models, rule-based systems, as well as the optimization algorithms. Um, in our research, we have to, well, in the beginning, we had various hypotheses, various ideas, and we see that on one hand, AI can provide a lot of transparency, accountability when it comes to democracy. It has the power of enabling rapid responses to wrongdoings, but on the other hand, if the algorithmic systems themselves are biased, opaque, if we talk about a lack of transparency, they can also reinforce the undemocratic practices by excluding or by forming a new form of technocratic control. And here we tried to look what was each country's approach. Um, Within one presentation, the budgetary capture came to mind, and the budgetary suggestion. In this current research, we did not look at the budgetary capture. However, we are going to have a small opening towards the end of the presentation on state capture, elite capture, budgetary capture, as well as a new type, newly defined, the algorithmic capture, where there is going to be more work on the topic, but this was not the scope for the current research that we have over here. Then when it comes to the methodology, we made here a comparative study between the two countries, employing several tools to analyze systemically analyze the integration of the AI in the anti-corruption strategies. We had developed governance mapping as well as risk typology metrics, where we used to trace various key institutional arrangements. For example, we looked at various legal frameworks, as well as the various risks that AI can pose by its adoption. And our research draws on different case studies, utilizing, for example, audits, reports, official reports, of course, AI legal frameworks, agency documentation. We looked through Senate filings within the United States, for example, watchdog assessments, and we went through a lot of gray literature, um, which at the end is actually one of our limitations also, we only have the United States and Germany, so it is not research that can be yet generalized. But right now we are working with several countries where we are having a more inclusive framework, and we will try to make more of a predictable, generalizable research. But Paulina is going to give more details on that. For this research, it was a little bit difficult to get many interview partners. We only had one interview within the United States, a few informal discussions with participants with both countries, because an interview for 1 hour within employees, public employees, well, they do not necessarily have the time on one hand. On the other hand, there was a matter of trust, data privacy, and it was difficult getting interview participants for the study. Long story short, the study incorporates a more normative framework where we tried to look also at the public interest, and the design orientation also is consistent with the chosen definition on corruption, and the conceptual framework emphasizes the fact that we concretely look at the AI-driven anti-corruption measures, how they are consistent with a deliberate misuse of the definition that is used in the various authorities of corruption, how they are working with it, what is their awareness level, if there's awareness level, if they have a risk assessment also within these government departments. So yes. As I mentioned, unfortunately, the generalizability of the research is limited, but we work to make this better. And I assume many people have the knowledge, well, a good overview on the fact that AI is at the intersection of integrity and innovation. So it's at a paradoxical crossroads between the two, when carefully aligned with the public interest. The AI-based tools have a very high potential to strengthen democracy. It has the capability of making more transparent, creating more transparency. It can improve the public service delivery, enables also the civilian participation. However, if it is misused or implemented without robust safeguards, it can weaken the state's institutions, and it can erode trust. And here is where in the future we plan to work with the algorithmic capture. The risks associated with weak or absent controls are significant. It has a very strong impact on the decision making. So again, if this is concentrated in the wrong hands, it can bypass accountability, facilitate corruption, and it can lead to a democratic backsliding. I am now going to leave the floor to Paulina for the conceptual framework.
Thank you, Monica. I think one of the things that what we ended up realizing through this study is that artificial intelligence is not a neutral tool. It's really a component that can, as Monica indicated, either strengthen or erode systems or of public integrity. As we assessed AI, we used 3 interlocking functions. First, normative alignment, whether AI systems are designed to reinforce constitutional and public values. Second, we used a design orientation to assess how models are trained, labeled, and validated across corruption indicators. And we used governance integration to assess the institutional capacity to audit, oversee, and correct algorithmic decisions. Collectively, these functions really rest on the principles of transparency, accountability, and fairness. Next slide. So as part of this, as part of this process, we ended up identifying from our literature reviews as well as our overviews of many of the grade literature, as well as the public documents that we assessed, that really the best practices we identified include robust data governance, continuous monitoring through machine learning operations, privacy, protected use of generative and synthetic data, and strong interagency collaboration. We found that these elements taken together create what we call strategic alignment loops, and they link technical design, ethical intent, and public trust. Next slide. As we started to assess the governance models and the legal infrastructure, we did notice that in the United States specifically, there are two different phases of AI implementation or processes of AI implementation that should be considered. One is the traditional systems within government institutions that have been in development for a good 20 years. And then there's also a separate process, which we'll deal with it shortly, for the creation of the Department of Government Efficiency, and the known as DOGE. So before the DOGE era, AI in anti-corruption systems really functioned as an extension of institutional integrity. Our comparative analysis actually ends up finding that as we look through 5 core dimensions of functional deployment, legal foundations, institutional sector, institutional readiness, sector-specific risks and governance, that both countries use AI for detection, investigation, and prevention of corruption. But the risk tiers differ quite a bit. High-risk domains like defense and welfare actually require judicial, or in the case of Germany, parliamentary supervision. So next slide. So here as we started exploring the process, we ended up finding that the US and Germany really represented contrasting governance models. The US's approach is decentralized and experimental, and agencies define their own AI roles, and they often produce inconsistencies implementation across the various departments. They're also directed by administrative tools, which are transitory. And I'll let Monica discuss briefly the contrast with Germany.
Thank you very much. On the other hand, well, in Germany, the anti-corruption strategies that are involving the AI are marked by a very strong prioritization of the legal conformity with the EU standards, as well as the GDPR measures. And in Germany, we have the Informationstechnik-Zentrum-Bund. It's the ITT Bund, which is the central IT provider within the government. And it's here that all the various ethical AI standards are issued. It plays a vital role in this case. It's the central infrastructure, so to say, and it is the body that approaches and encourages sandbox controlled deployment of the algorithmic systems within the government. So AI utilization here is pretty centralized with strict oversight and gradual implementation in the secure, testable environments. However, on a closer look on one of the surveys that has been emitted by the left party, we have seen that within some ministries here, when it comes to the risk awareness of the use of the various IT tools in place, in important ministries, there's lack of this awareness, lack of such teachings, schoolings of the employees. So this was just a little highlight on it. But yes, when it comes to, for example, the natural language processing, this is also increasingly utilized for the anomaly detection when it comes for procurement processes and flagging potential corrupt activities. Uh, but yes, basically here everything is very centralized. Paulina?
We can go to the next slide. So as I noted earlier, the creation of Doge has really marked a turning point in the US, where traditionally through the other institutionalized departments, there's been a slow, careful, thoughtful process where there's been an incredible risk aversion to employing technologies that could generate damage or harm or misinformation for the public. Doge has really symbolized an accelerated technological adoption without the corresponding legislative or ethical safeguards that have been featured in other departments. Under Doge, in fact, independent oversight has really weakened and workplace protections have eroded. And in many cases, whistleblowers have faced retaliation. This, of course, has suggested to us that AI really can be a tool that can be weaponized to consolidate executive power rather than democratize it when there aren't the adequate safeguards that are put into place. Next slide. So as part of this process, we really have seen, as I noted, this accelerated technology adoption process where Doge has administrated the has bypassed the administrative safeguards that are traditionally demanded by the Administrative Procedures Act. They've used algorithmic systems to make policy decisions unilaterally and haven't done a lot of the training and testing that is required in other departments. For example, they've overridden budget decisions that have been promulgated into law. And this algorithmic governance bypass has allowed technology to overrule essentially a law that has been promulgated. This, of course, the way that Doge has deployed its work across governments across departments throughout government has really created a series of constitutional controversies that have resulted in numerous, I mean, countless lawsuits as a result of their actions overriding existing law that's been put into place and blurring the separations of power. Since our study, for example, outside budget efforts and experts really can't nail down a number of how much money Doge has actually cut. Even congressional appropriators, who are the people that decide how federal funds should be spent in the first place, don't know how much money has been cut without a clear, transparent process. This really suggests that procedural shortcuts can really convert innovation into institutional risk. Next slide, please. So as we start really examining the cases where Doge has expanded its reach to, we really end up seeing that algorithmic errors have really disrupted essential services. AI miscalculations at VA or Veterans Affairs or the Social Security Administration have really led to mistakenly canceled contracts and frozen benefits. Workforce automations have produced abrupt layoffs that have created significant disruptions with the utilization of auto riff AI and surveillance tools like Grok that have targeted dissenters. These examples really illustrate that the cost of AI mismanagement is borne by citizens and not necessarily institutions. Furthermore, as we also see that there's been a false transparency that's been put forth in these cuts and these steps because they do not explain, they explain what they've done, but they don't explain their methodology, their metrics, the criteria that they use, how decisions were made. They just list their actions. And there's also a lot of concerns with self-dealing. There is a lot of blurred public and private interests. For example, major contracts worth up to $5 billion were directed toward Elon Musk affiliated companies without competitive bidding, and on several occasions they were taken from existing companies and just given to Elon Musk's firms, which means essentially that these processes really allowed for Elon Musk's rivals to have their contracts canceled. Additionally, the patterns of conflict of interest and privatized decision making really reveal how corruption can be legalized through technology, being that the process has extended beyond steering to Elon Musk's companies. It's also incorporated algorithms that are beneficial to Elon Musk's private interest in his companies. Not to mention that, just as a small example, they're including the primary process for actually providing public information, or the mechanism for providing public information to the public regarding the work of Doge, is exclusively a company owned by Elon Musk, which is X. And at one point, when the website was being kicked off, they even used the logo of his cryptocurrency, which is a Doge dog. Eventually, it was taken off the next day. But these actions really suggest that without careful controls, you really have this process of an oligarchy capture that actually could threaten the institutional separations of powers, and also allow for private interest to really capture the process. Next slide. So this paradigm shift post-Doge, really, as I noted, really we're starting to see this, elite control over data with weakened accountability and an entrenchment of partisans dominating the process. This broader risk is a tech-driven oligopoly within government. And this erosion of democratic safeguards, where algorithms become instruments of power rather than tools for justice, which of course puts into question whether or not this is a tool that can, as we noted earlier, accelerate the democratic process or really create retrenchment in democratic processes. Next slide. So as part of this process, we really looked at the frameworks that are currently in place across Germany, Europe, and the United States, in the more consistent institutions that are actual government institutions that are in place and have been tested. And we would recommend that a comprehensive governance architecture should be built around transparency, accountability, equity, security, privacy, and participation. The implementation should be phased, starting with readiness assessments, followed with domain-specific deployments, and independent oversight is key as part of this process, ideally with some enforcement power. Regular audits and adversarial threat modeling and workforce training are also essential to restoring trust and legitimacy, particularly as we have seen in DOGE. Many of the errors that have occurred have been due to lack of training because the domain expertise has not matched the technical expertise that people have employed in making significant cutbacks. Next slide. So this initial paper that we worked on really served as the foundation or stepping stone for our future research, being that most of our research was actually just qualitative. So here we ended up concluding that, as we noted earlier, the use of AI is not just a neutral tool, and that the line between innovation and institutional erosion can be very, very thin. And in order to strengthen democratic accountability with deployment of AI, we have to have embedded governance structures that prioritize the public interest. Which, of course, how do we actually measure this is the question that really comes up. And as we started really thinking about how we were going to expand on this foundational research, we really started to see that AI doesn't just support potentially integrity, but when and why it fails is important. And it can become, as we noted earlier, a mechanism of capture instead of reform. So we've been working collaboratively, Monica and I, in developing an AI capture predictive framework to model, and which will model how 6 structural factors integrated over time interact with one another. And these are political will, institutional strength, technological, hold on, somehow my, this went blank very quickly. Can you guys see me? My technology.
We can see you and we can see the
see
slide.
you. Yeah.
Okay, all right, great. Okay, I can see you again and I can hear you. Sorry about that. So as as I was saying, we are integrating into this process let's see, this AI predictive capture predictive framework, where we're looking at political will, institutional strength, technological maturity, using a digitalization scale, algorithmic governance, and citizen autonomy. And we're using this across national data set, including VDEM, the World Governance Indicators, OECD AI, and IDEA, to measure how these variables shape reform outcomes across 12 countries. So the model integrates also crisis pressure as a contextual modifier to explain why governance can deteriorate under stress or emergency powers. We also distinguish in this process 4 forms of capture, including state, elite, budget capture, but we're also integrating a new type of capture, which is algorithmic. Our hypothesis is that reform resilience emerges when transparency, accountability, and participation align, while capture arises under opacity and institutional weakness and crisis-driven exceptionalism. We are really going to try to combine panel data modeling with qualitative document validation. So ultimately, our outcome with the AI Capture Predictive Index will be the first longitudinal data set linking of governance, technology, and autonomy. We're hoping that this will be the second step in our initial research to forecast where AI-driven reforms are most at risk, and to design policy safeguards that strengthen democratic resilience rather than accelerate digital authoritarianism. So that is the end of our presentation. And we would love to have any feedback, any thoughts, any questions. And we'll follow whatever process Bonnie and Giovanna have set forth for us.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I have a question. I'm looking for the applause. So thank you very much. I am curious about, I know you mentioned some of the sources of the data that you're using for the AI structural predictors. And I'm just, I'm like, where are you getting political will from, for example? Where are you getting citizen autonomy? Well, so I don't know if you have that somewhere
We
in a
do.
in a file that you can show us, or if you just want to tell us exactly where you're getting
I mean,
those
we
data.
I can, let me open this up. I'm gonna have to ask, for you to give me sharing powers.
Can you allow that, Gio, please?
I stopped the screen sharing. It's just that we highlight the political will is an indicator that we use for the
Yeah.
current research, not the one that we presented for the research that will go on right now. And here, any type of, as we are at the beginning of the research, everything is absolutely welcome, as there's a lot of meat that can be put around the bone at this stage.
And so we are, so we'll be looking, as we mentioned earlier, for political will, institutional strength, tech maturity, digitalization scale, algorithmic governance, citizen autonomy. And the political will, we will be looking essentially at world governance indicators. So where we will control for corruption, we'll use the VDEM Public Sector Corruption Index, and we will also use the VDEM Executive Corruption Index. We are going to be looking for these we're going to be creating scales. We're going to normalize scales across all of these different variables that we will be getting, again, from VDEM, from the Digital Society Project, from the World Bank Government Tech Maturity Index, and we'll also be looking at let me see, e-government development index. And for each one of these different digitalization scales, algorithmic governance, and we'll be using these, we'll be scaling them on a scale from 1 to 5 to be able to determine, define our index. And we're also going to be incorporating validation, forecasting, and benchmark designs. And here we're going to incorporate countries that we feel represent some either state capture or budget capture or algorithmic capture or elite capture, but also have different governance structures. Where there's either executive centralization, or they're not executively led. So we have a variety of different examples of different types of government that are participating, so that we can identify, again, as our benchmark control cases. We're going to be using some countries that have high autonomy benchmarks, some that have low autonomy benchmarks, and have mid-autonomy benchmarks, so that way we can generate this comparison and actually make some estimates on how these models would actually function. I hope that
Fantastic. It
answers your
sounds
question.
yes, yes, I understand you're just starting this next phase,
Yeah.
and it really sounds fascinating and very, very important and useful. Let's move on to some other questions. Giovanna?
Please unmute first, because I think that she has to go early, I think. So I can make my question later.
Oh, thank you so much. That's very kind of you. Many thanks for the presentation. This sounds fascinating. I have two brief questions. On one of the slides, you had one of the possible risks of DOGE as algorithmic governance as a policy bypass. I was wondering if you could explain that a little bit, what you mean by that, and Which policies have you observed this happening? So that's my first question. And the second one is more of a concern with respect to citizen autonomy. And I mean, from what you were describing, which is fascinating, but combining this with, in general, our sort of general observation that citizen autonomy and even citizens understanding what this is about, what AI is about, how is it used, etc. I'm wondering, how do you define and measure, or how are you planning to define and measure citizen autonomy? But I'm also wondering, how low it might be in general, right? So if you could comment a little bit on that, I would really appreciate it.
So with the algorithmic governance policy bypass, I think what's really jarring about the way that DOGE has been unfolded is that, first of all, they're not an official department. They're unlike the other institutions that are in government. They are essentially, they've been created through an administrative executive order, and they're not a permanent institution. In fact, they're designed to dissolve by July 4th of 2026. So they're this temporary entity. Yet somehow they've been afforded so much power. They have gone in and they've amended, and it's unclear how far this has reached. They've amended thousands of pieces of regulations without going through a public process for commenting. It's unclear from the documentation how much they have changed, or whether there's suggestions, what phases these changes have been at. They've gone in and they've set up departments, offices in all departments throughout government. They've anywhere from just created these algorithms where they've inputted certain, which they haven't adequately trained. And so they've put in words, a list of about 100 words or so, which incidentally include words like women, disparity, things that could lead really to anything and any conclusion. And based on that, they've made determinations. Okay, this is what we're going to cut. This isn't irrelevant. And they haven't gone through the proper processes of, once the government actually makes a budget allocation and it's approved by government, that's actually statute. That's statute. And they've overridden statute by saying, we're canceling this funding, and that's going to be the end of it. And there's no record of how much has been canceled. There's no clear follow-up, but they've also used contract software to make decisions about what personnel is staying, what personnel is going. They've also deployed these tools without the algorithmic audits that you're supposed to integrate. They've done so at times without the in-the-loop oversight or the cybersecurity vetting that you're supposed to go through the Federal Risk and Authorization Management Program. And they've also, for example, in the VA, which is Veterans Affairs for those that are not in the United States, they canceled 2,000 contracts with no clear metrics. These are contracts that were approved by the budget, but the engineers had no domain expertise. They had significant errors, and they've also embedded a series of biases to make policy choices. So they're framing the use of AI as nonpartisan, but they've again contextualized the canceling of grants and programs as non-essential or DI related, and they're categorizing as administratively efficient, but again, they're overriding the budgetary process. And the list goes on in terms of just decisions that they have made And they've gone into nonprofit organizations, and even though they're separate corporate entities or civil society, and attempted to override their decision-making, it's been blocked, and this has resulted in a series of lawsuits. But they have overextended their authority while not being a real department with any supposed real power, just recommendations. And they've really altered the functions of government in a very small amount of time because the safeguards aren't there in place. And the list of constitutional and legal controversies and the litigation that has ensued as a result of this, I mean, I think in June or July, it was over 150 lawsuits that were filed as a result of this. And the complaints were very systematic: weakening of independent oversight institutions, centralization of executive power, erosion of workplace protections and union rights, discrimination and surveillance abuses, retaliation against whistleblowers, dismantling of environmental, healthcare, and educational safeguards, threats to state sovereignty and democratic norms, and the list goes on and on and on. We could be here for another 2 hours for me to go over all of the different ways in which some of these systems have been degraded. So I hope that portion of your question is answered. With respect to, let's see, your other question was pertaining to
Citizen autonomy.
Citizen autonomy. So with citizen autonomy, let's see. So citizen autonomy, we actually are going to use, we're going to use the GSOD database, and we're going to look at representation, free and equal access to political representation. We're also going to look at rights, civil liberties, and access to resources. And we're going to look at participation, which specifically is going to look at citizen engagement and activism. So that is how we will be classifying, citizen autonomy. However, if you have suggestions on anything we should be integrating into here, this is the time to make them, because we would love to hear them.
Excellent. Very, very informative, Paulina. Thank you. Giovanna.
Okay. Thank you, Paulina and Monica, for your presentation. It's a pleasure to have you here in the ACA Forum. I had like 2 questions, but I probably it's because I would like to understand the context of this presentation. The presentation aims to be a research paper or a chapter book, but it's a research, right? It's an academic research, right? Okay. Yeah, because I consider this is very appropriate, very in time. The topic regarding the artificial intelligence and corruption and anti-corruption is a very, very in time topic, and I consider this is a great contribution. So I am wondering if you would like to frame the paper in terms of this is a qualitative analysis, and this is it's good. You don't need the generalization part, because you are like comparing 2 different government systems, US and Germany, and you can focus on frame the paper of the chapter in that part, in that you are comparing two different government systems, and what are the difference between them. And you can also frame the paper in a way that you are saying that these 2 comparative case studies that are different are important, because they show us how regulations on artificial intelligence regarding corruption at working in these 2 most different systems. It depends on how you emphasize the difference between the 2 systems. On the other hand, I think that or not on the other hand, regarding the same point, I think that the qualitative analysis is good to understand this and to understand what you are doing. You need to you need to focus on why this is not generalized or this is a small sample, because you are comparing two cases. And I think that you need to make a stronger point on why qualitative analysis is good on this. And I am wondering why you are conducting the interviews. I think that you also conducted like documentary analysis, right? You review all the laws and you review all the documents regarding implementations of different regulations in the two countries. So I think that the documentary analysis is enough for presenting and for making the stronger point. Probably the interviews could help to validate maybe the instruments to evaluate the documents. But I am not so sure if you need to mix, because as you say, it has been difficult to try to find people to conduct the interviews because it requires a lot of time. But probably just with the documentary interview, but while documenting, and maybe the interviews just to validate the instruments to review the documents could be enough. You don't need more. Now, regarding the toolkit, you have said that probably you are gonna share with us the toolkit that you use it, but I don't understand very well. The toolkit is for evaluating the laws, for find the for the categories of how you understand this the relationship between artificial intelligence and governance. Yeah, I don't understand very well about the toolkit, but I'm very happy to share with all the network, because I think that this is a very interesting instrument that all the people can use, and also to give you feedback. I mean, if you also want feedback on the toolkit, you can design an instrument for collect this feedback, and I can share also with all the network. And probably there are other people who are interested in give the feedback in the toolkit, and also use this toolkit for evaluating their own countries. Yeah, that's cool.
So I have been monopolizing responses, so I want to make sure that I give Monica a chance to comment if she wants to, and then I'll step in once she comments, so that way we can hear her brilliant thoughts.
Oh, thank you very much, Paulina. Thank you for the feedback for publishing it in a paper. The thing is that the way we wrote the actual paper, there is a very, very big, complex framework, what we've worked with. And it was still very broad. In the end, we realized when it was all finished that we could actually make 3 papers out of it, of how complicated it was, how many indicators, how many values it had inside. So we would have to rework that. But on the comparison between the two systems and the way that the two governance models, when it comes to the use of AI, that one, it's encouraging. I really thought that we might want to include more countries, but it is a good point. We could use these two as a first pilot study, so to say, and get more countries on that. To the question when it comes to interviews, we actually wanted to see how the civil servants perceive the use of AI, what type of AI tools are they using, but also how or what their level of awareness towards the risks. So bias, discrimination, for example, again, the use of personal data. There was this survey that has been done, unfortunately, only in 2023. There's no new data within the German ministries, for example, on the level of the sorry, on the level of, I got distracted by the chat, awareness concretely, how many training activities have there been provided to the employees to the use of the AI tools, what risks there are, but also issues when it comes to data protection, the protection of the data of the population, of the population, for example. And you wanted to see concretely what the perception of the civil servants that is why we wanted to use interviews to have a better overview within this field. When it comes to the toolkit, that has been the wonderful work of Paulina, brainstorming, research, sweat, and effort. So it is definitely hers to explain the metrics also developed in there.
I think also one of the things that came up in our informal conversations with some of the individuals who would not go on record regarding their experiences and the integration of AI into government, as well as in my formal interview with one of the a person that had been working in government and was actually a chief information officer, is that there's a lot of hesitation and there's a lot of uncertainty before even any public servant really wants to or will consider adopting or using AI, because again, this is informal conversations that we had with individuals, and there was a lot of trepidation and a lot of concern that they would get something wrong, that there would be they weren't certain what would be some of the risks. They were concerned about potentially who has ownership over the data and some practical administrative questions that they had. So this toolkit really is intended not to be necessarily a research-based toolkit, but rather one that helps those who in government to ask the right questions before they move to adopt AI. And so that way it can make sure that, as they proceed, there's a lot of decisions that they have to think about based on both based on the research that we conducted, and also just the informal questions and concerns that were expressed to us. And some of the practical elements that's or implementation challenges were people were concerned that that the tools didn't align with the mission or public values. They were concerned whether or not the bias had been adequately tested. They wanted to see who was accountable for errors. And they wanted to see how, and they were concerned about things like how do we ensure transparency when we're using tools that we are not necessarily sure that we're even controlling. And then the issue of governance and monitoring the utilization of these tools from adoption to implementation to long-term utilization was also something that they were very concerned about. So this toolkit is really intended to help those who have not adopted or are thinking about adopting an emerging technology, utilizing AI, what they have to be concerned about, including there were a lot of concerns with the people in the informal conversations that we had, which weren't that many. They were a handful. Just to, I don't want to give the implication we spoke to like 100 people informally. We didn't. We spoke to a small amount, including the chief information officer. And people really were concerned about or had experiences with vendors who had not used or adequately trained systems that had mistakes. So this is just questions that people should be asking themselves before they questions or conversations that need to be had before this is actually adopted in government.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'm afraid we are out of time. I'm sure there is, as you said, you could spend hours explaining all of the changes that have taken place, and really interesting work that you're doing. We look forward to seeing what you do in the future. Please keep us updated through our group in terms of, when you come out with new research. Everyone have a wonderful day, and we look forward to seeing you at the next ACA Forum.
Thank you very much. Thank you also for having us and for the organization.
Okay, bye-bye. See you next month.
Bye-bye.